Thank you. There we go. That might help things show up a little bit. Well, it's a great turnout. Thank you all very much for coming out this evening. It's a fairly, I'm hoping tonight's fairly interactive. So it's not just me talking at you all day. So most of you have gotten a little slip of piece of paper and a little pencil or pen to take notes on, because there will be test quizzes and homework at the end. So you're not allowed to fall asleep. All those neat reading materials, please save them for later. Not right now. I wanted to jump right in and just talk about what a wonderful place we live. We are a neat mix of forest and dunes and wetlands and prairies. We have wonderful places to take a hike, wonderful places to picnic, wonderful places to paddle. These are some of my favorite places just right around here, up in Barry County and down in Berrien and Warren Woods and Warren Dunes, wonderful places like that. So to get all of us thinking about neat natural areas, here comes the first part. There'll be 4 series of 2 questions for you. First, I want you to jot down, what was your favorite place to experience nature as a child? And sort of keep that in your mind as we go along tonight. And then underneath that, what is your current place to experience nature in Southwest Michigan? All right? I found myself, this question was easy, and this question was harder. I think we all have a place where childhood resonates when you think about that. This, for me, it's just hard to pick, because I'm roaming all about here. For me, my favorite childhood place wasn't even in Michigan. I grew up in Illinois, but my family, my great-grandmother had property in northern Wisconsin. And so I grew up, that's where nature was to me, was to get out of the suburbs of Chicago and go to the lake where my great-grandmother's cabin was. So that place is very near and dear to my heart. It's where I feel like I first truly fell in love with the out of doors. My current place, favorite place to explore nature, actually kind of changes from month to month, I have to admit. But these first now thawing days has me thinking spring, and I think wildflowers and birds, and I think of our Kessling Nature Preserve. Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy owns a property in the far corner near New Buffalo, in the corner of our region here. Right down in this area where I get some of the first spring wildflowers, because it's near the Indiana state line that's southernmost, but the birds come pouring through. That's one of my special places. I want to start a list of some of these places in Southwest Michigan that mean something to you. So that's why you had to write it down, because this is the quiz part. All right. Where's someone hold up your hand if you have a favorite place here in Southwest Michigan? Yeah. Van Buren Dunes? Van Buren Youth Camp. All right. Youth. Let's see. Oh, and my pointer. All right, where's another favorite place? Yes, right there. The Calhaven Trail. Calhaven Trail. Ooh, that's a long one. There. All right, where'd my pointer go? Let's see if this little thing works here. Well, maybe, maybe not. All right, so Calhaven Trail. Someone from this side. A favorite place in South? Yeah. Kleinstuck. Ooh, that strikes close to home to me. That one, that literally is in my backyard. Yes. Grand Mere. Ooh, that's competition for one of my all-time favorites. Grand Mere. All right, so far we have the Van Buren Youth Camp. That's up Bloomingdale area, I believe. Yep. Calhaven Trail, so they picked the whole way from Kalamazoo to South Haven. Kleinstuck, right here in Kalamazoo. We've got Grandmere State Park, down just south of Stevensville area. How about another?
Russ Forest.
Russ Forest. Ooh, site of one of the largest tulip trees in the entire state. That's closer to Marcellus, Cassopolis, Decatur region over here. There's some neat stuff going on there. Okay, how about another? Saugatuck Dunes, going up near the top of my map. There, up there. Yep. Let's see. Okay, we got some really, we're spreading out here. Lakeshore, Kalamazoo, anyone? How about
Go Lake Kellogg Bird Sanctuary.
Go Lake, there we go. Let's get in here. All right, and that's right over that way. Ooh, Pierce Cedar Creek. Up. It is, it's right about there. I can use my, oh, it's waking up. There we go, there we go. So, Pierce Cedar Creek. That, we just refer to that as the Institute in our office. It's the Pierce Cedar Creek Environmental Institute up on Brewster Lake, former Lou Batts property up there. Anyway.
Are you on the 1 or 2?
I'm on number 2. Oh, it can be number 1. They might be the very same place.
No, it isn't.
Oh.
Glen, Michigan.
Oh, Glen.
On the shores, or the bluffs of Lake Michigan.
I just finished my master's work on the bluffs at Glen, Michigan, and I didn't even just put you in the audience. That is home to the Land Conservancy's Wakena Preserve. That's where we had a gift of land, Glen Ganges area, of 365 acres on Lake Michigan. That's number 1 on our map. That's not a ranking. That just happens to be we started up in that corner. Okay, one more. How about one more? Yeah.
Well, it doesn't really have a name, but it does now. It didn't then. Now it is Woodbridge Hills and the Morris Golf Club. Then it was 400 acres of farmland, woods, and swamp.
Ooh. I didn't even know how to write that up, but that's we'll keep that in mind. We'll keep that in mind.
Cooley Farm, you can write that.
All right, the Cooley Farm. All right, well, that is a wonderful collection of places where we've got dunes on the lake shore. We've got forests, like Russ Forest, those big old tulip trees, beech maple forest. We've got interior areas like up in Gull Lake, more of oak woods and on lakes. We've got some Pierce Cedar Creek Institute along the Cedar Creek. Kleinstuck, an ancient kettle hole. I'll talk about those in a little bit. Right here in Kalamazoo, a little bit all over the place. Have you ever thought about why those places are there? Why is Russ Forest where Russ Forest is? Why is Kleinstuck where Kleinstuck is? Why was the Cooley Farm where it was and not anymore? How has our landscape changed? So tonight I'm largely going to sort of move through a series of 3 things: our geology, our climate, and our conservation. So the first part is geography, understanding sort of where it all came from. Why did they get assembled where they are? How have they changed? And then, why are they still there? And are they going to stay there? So my story starts about 15,000 years ago. I'm letting you guys off the hook because sometimes I'll start 15 million years ago, but we don't have all that time tonight. So we'll start just, and this is going to be rapid geology here. At the end, I'll give you some more links if you really want to go hardcore into it. It started about 15,000 years ago, our story does, when there was a great big blanket of ice and snow on top of us. All right, that's where all the good stories start in Michigan, is when we're buried under snow 6 miles deep. But things were changing. The ice was retreating and leaving a brand new, scraped clean landscape. Now, I taught kids for many years at Surrett Nature Center about trying to teach them about moraines. And the director there tried to teach me about how the glacier left moraines. And it never made a lot of sense to me, because they talked about the ice and the ice retreating, but it being a conveyor belt of gravel. Like, well, if it's moving backwards, how is it moving gravel forwards? That doesn't make sense to me. But I realized something came to me the other night when I was trying to figure this out, and it made more sense to me if, instead of thinking about it as a block of ice that kind of sits there, think about it as ice cream, okay? And you've got a big block of ice cream oozing down. It's not just sitting there, it's actually oozing forward. And I have a 5-year-old boy who's a very picky eater. And you give him a big bowl of chocolate chip ice cream with vanilla, he will pick away at the chocolate and leave it all behind. So if you imagine this is chocolate chip ice cream oozing over Michigan, and my son is at the end here eating it as fast as it's coming, the chocolate chips are going to start to pile up. All right, so you've got ice cream oozing at a whole line of 5-year-olds, eating away, right at the same speed it's melting, gravel, I mean chocolate chips, start piling up. Now, if they start eating it faster than it's oozing, they make progress and move forward and leave that mound of chips behind until the ice cream speeds up again to be as fast as they're eating it. And now you're getting another mound of chocolate chips. But meanwhile, they've left behind scattered chips all behind them. And that continues to move on in a series of oozing ice cream and marching 5-year-olds, leaving behind giant mounds of chocolate chips strewn across the Midwest. Till finally, all the ice cream is gone, they're full, and you turn them over to your grandparents. And you're left behind by the mounds of chocolate chips. Now, by the time I finished this, all I could think of was a TV show I watched as a kid of the conveyor belt of chocolates coming down the belt, and Lucy and Ethel eating as fast as, trying to package them in the box till it gets too fast, they stuff them in their mouth, and then you end up with mounds of chocolates all over. So now when you go over the glacial moraines of our region, I hope you think of chocolate. That's at least one thing I can do for you tonight. So this happened in our region. It's not just sort of a make-believe story, that there actually was glaciers that came and left piles of gravel behind, and geologists have named them areas. And these are real features on our landscapes. We are hanging out here tonight right on the edge of the Kalamazoo Moraine. Are these really real places? Well, you actually can physically see them on the landscape. Here I've sort of over-exaggerated the topography of Southwest Michigan. And it looks just kind of like a jumbled mess until you start looking for patterns. And there you can see, again, sort of outline that area in red. The first thing to be uncovered in our region, actually in the state of Michigan, as the glaciers retreated, was this region, sort of triangular region between Sturgis, Three Rivers, and Edwardsburg, over this area, and that was called the interlobate moraine area. And then, for us here in Kalamazoo, of particular interest is the giant Kalamazoo moraine, one of the defining geologic characteristics of our region, which more and more, as I explore our natural areas, becomes an extremely important component of why our natural areas are where they are. And I know it's talking about lake effect. Is this lake? This was early Lake Michigan coming forward and retreating and piling up the gravel and later the sand. So we have the Kalamazoo running down through there, the Valparaiso. Again, this is the lakes retreating and the glaciers retreating. And then you've got lake border moraines. And these, I think, are really interesting because they change our shoreline of Lake Michigan dramatically. You don't have the bluffs of Glen without a lake border moraine ending right up in this area here. See how it's all rough up there? This is the bluff region of here. Casco's new nature park with the giant, there's about a 120-foot bluff overlook of Lake Michigan right up there. But that also dictates where there are dunes. But again, I'm showing you maps. Are these real places? Can you actually is it on such a scale you can't experience? Well, actually you can experience this right around here. One of my favorite places is if you're on your way to Chicago, going along 94, right up in this area, right by Stevensville. So it's the Red Arrow Highway exit, south of St. Joe. You've just gotten past St. Joe, you've gone over the river, and then there's the exit for Red Arrow Highway, all right? If I zoom in there, and you're going to come down farther, this is the Grand Mere State Park. See these ridgely areas? These are, I don't know if ridgely is a real word, but it seems to fit the picture. Warren Dunes State Park is right here. Grand Mere State Park is here. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see that interchange I was just mentioning. Something interesting goes on. That's where the highway breaks through that lake border moraine. Meanwhile, Red Arrow Highway hops up on top of the moraine. So I encourage you, if you've got the time, hop off of 94 for a little bit. That's a police trap anyway. They hang out down on the John Beers Road exit. That's a good place to slow down. It's a speed trap. But meanwhile, if you hop off to head towards Stevensville, you get up on Red Arrow Highway and you get great views as you're cruising down on top of the moraine. And it's not till you hit Bridgman down below, you come down off the moraine, Red Arrow drops off, and 94 hops on top of the moraine. So you start seeing like, okay, some of these old geologic features actually kind of dictated where our roads were. The railroad. They weren't dummies when they were building the railroads. They didn't want to have to deal with that lake border moraine, so it runs on the back side of that moraine all the way through. And again, these dictate where our natural features can exist. For in these examples, sand dunes can't grow, so to speak, on top of moraines, with the exception of Sleeping Bear Dunes. That's one of the few places you can find a perched dune, where the dunes actually formed up on top of glacial material. In our region, they could only exist when those moraines are pulled back from the lakeshore and leave flat places for the sand to accumulate. So when you have the lake border moraines touching the shore of Lake Michigan, you have bluff. You don't get dune. And that's all being seen right here. But let's come a little closer to home and think about what we can see right here. Does anyone know where these people are all standing? Where are they standing? The sky deck. That is a great place to appreciate the view of moraines. And if you want to have a cocktail, that works pretty well too. I keep thinking maybe I should do a geology class from the sky deck. Everyone would be in a really good mood up there. So yes, all these people are standing on top of the sky deck, which is the building downtown where there's a bar on top of the roof. That's right here, and they're looking west towards the sunset. What they're looking at is the Kalamazoo Moraine. That is a great view. You can actually see the ridge rising up in the distance. Driving over here, all of you came up the Kalamazoo Moraine. We're sitting right up here on top of it. You can see right here's where we're hanging out. Down below here Does anyone know what this area would be right down here? It's flat, wet, full of springs. There you go. That's Wolf Lake Fish Hatchery. There's a reason why the fish hatchery is down there. It has to do with our mounds of gravel. So here we are right here in Oshtemo on the edge of this moraine. You come over to the next peak, that's Husted's farm stand right there, and then you start dropping down the hill, heading towards on the border of Van Buren County. Pretty good farmland. Too steep and rocky right up in here, but you get down here, then you hit Gene the Pumpkin Man stand down here, and then you drop off the moraine down to Wolf Lake Fish Hatchery area. That's one of the other big things that moraines do for our area. That has to do with the water. So when it rains in our area, the water doesn't fall evenly. Well, I mean, the rain falls evenly, but the way it goes into the ground is uneven. It likes to go through sandy gravel areas, like these moraines in here. And then you don't get smoother ground till you get down here. If you zoom out, guys, when you get home, one of your homework things is to play around on Google Earth. Zoom around, and you'll see patterns of vegetation. And some of that has to do with our glacial history, and some of that has to do with our climate. Right here, glacial, if you zoom out on Google Earth, you will see a band of green running from Barry County near Hastings all the way down towards Decatur and down to Dowagiac. That's the high ridge of the moraine. It's where it's not good to farm. That's where the trees grew back, all along that ridge. And then down below at the base of the moraine is back where there's muck and springs. That's where the water comes out. So here we are in Kalamazoo. Here's that Wolf Lake Fish Hatchery area. We're up here. Here's some of that band of green I was talking about. Goes down through Mattawan. There's those ridges I'm talking about. Now when it rains, the water likes to go down through gravel. It perks really easily. You can also see on Google Earth other signs of gravel. Those are the gravel mines along Ravine Road. There's a new one right up there, relatively new, on 10th and G. So the folks on G Avenue know all about the Kalamazoo Moraine, I'm sure, riding back and forth on there. So where the water goes down into the ground is called a recharge area, and then it gets expressed at the base of these moraines. So the water comes out. That's why we have rivers where we do. The Kalamazoo River was happily moving right along towards Lake Michigan until it hit the moraine, and it had to pick a place to go. And it got sent straight north till it could find a break in the moraine, and that wasn't until it got to about Plainwell. And that comes out of Plainwell, and that's where it's kind of, you get almost like it's turning and moving much faster. It's finally escaping the moraine and heading straight towards the lake, towards Saugatuck that way. Well, how does that matter? Does that matter to us? It matters to our natural areas where the springs are, but it's also where we get our drinking water. We're not pumping it from Lake Michigan. This moraine is the recharge zone for all of our drinking water. Here are some of the major well fields of our region. Alsabo Preserve is a preserve because it's where a lot of our drinking water comes from. Out on Campbell Lake, the McLinden Trails. The, what's the name of the park up near Parchment? Spring Valley. Spring Valley. It's called Spring Valley for a reason. And all these spots are located in relation to where the moraines are. This is how our region has decided our wellhead protection areas are based on this. This is going back to the initial geology of our region, of understanding where water enters the ground and where we can drink it from. Okay, that's enough geology for a little while here. All right, we're going to move on to climate. I wanted to think of when people say climate, what's the next word you think of? Climate change. And that, everything changes. Speed of change can be different. So here's the next part you guys have to think about here. Question 1. How did your childhood natural area change from visit to visit? When you're thinking about when you were visiting that place, what were things you noticed as a kid that were different over the different times you visited it? For me, it was when I'd go to that lake, there was a triangular rock that I used to practice diving off of when I was a little boy, and it was how high was the lake compared to that rock? Was the tip of the rock showing, or was that much of it going? That was something that registered for me from a very early age that my favorite natural area changed. The lake level changed. There's lots of different ways you could see change from year to year at your favorite natural area. Did the trees get bigger? Did they get smaller? What did things get logged or not? Did new trails come? Did new animals come in? Did you have deer show up for the first time in your natural area? Turkey. And 2, how does your favorite place, that place before, change in that same way? Does it change from your visit to visit? I think about the Kessling Nature Preserve that I like to visit down in the southwest corner. One of the things that changed was garlic mustard. It had gotten pretty thick in there for a while, but we organized volunteers. And after only 3 or 4 years of going in and pulling out 15 bags of garlic mustard a visit, we now don't even fill one. It took a healthy natural area and some dedication, but it's nearly clean of that invasive species, and now it's almost entirely native wildflowers. Now they're doing the same thing with the multiflora rose, another invasive. So it's changing as we go there. How has your childhood natural area changed? Does anyone have an example of, do you remember how it used to change from your visit to visit? Less beach.
Yeah, less sand.
Less sand. Okay, at first I wasn't sure if it was trees or sand, but yes. Yeah, less.
The water and the campsites.
Okay.
Really long
Big.
beach area.
Yeah. Is that Lake Michigan levels?
And the
Change.
other side, like Harrisville and.
Okay, okay, cool. Yeah, excellent. Anyone else? Yeah.
Filling in the vegetation.
It's filled in quite. It used to be more open.
It used to be a lake and the grass became a wetland.
Oh, really? Yeah, the wetland. Too. Yeah. How about how about the youth camp? How's the youth camp changed? Excellent, excellent. Calhaven Trail seem any different? Anyone been there lately? Feel it's like any different?
Fewer trains.
Fewer trains. There is much fewer trains. I think they got chased out by the bicycles. Yeah, they got scared out there. Let's see. How about the Glen, Michigan Bluffs? Have you been out to the Bluffs this winter? Have you been out to the Bluffs in Glen this winter? In Glen?
It became, as I recall, and I was pretty little. As I recall, it got very overgrown. There were a couple bluff areas that seemed to have washed terribly, washed away.
Yeah.
And as I recall, only once, when I was quite small, the beach got kind of little.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's gone now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, my memory of that.
Yeah, yeah. I was out in that area just last week and looking at it, and the lake levels have reached kind of record highs in November. The November height was really, which is unusual. That's usually near its low. So that meant the storms, when they came in, had that much more water to work with. And the shift in the bluffs along the shore of Lake Michigan in our region is amazing. As I talked to people out there, they said you can tell who moved since the 1980s because they built stairs. where all of their stairs had washed away in the 80s. They built brand new stairs. And those new stairs are now went the way of the stairways in the 80s. And we're finding them scattered all up and down the beach. There's been amazing change up there. So, again, our climate has changed dramatically in the last 15,000 years. It was cold, got warmer, it's gotten colder and warmer and warmer and colder, changed a lot of different ways. And it's true that, 13,000, 7,000 years ago, we did have mammoths and mastodons walking around in Michigan. You might have seen in the news that in Bellevue just this last summer, some guys were digging up some stuff in the back there just on the corner of Eaton County and found a mammoth in there. You don't think about that in Michigan. You don't think of that being mastodon. We have both mastodons and mammoths in our area. And that our region, as the glaciers pulled back, was largely tundra. And then it was northern coniferous forest. And then it was more oak and maple. And then it got colder, and it turned back into conifers. And then it got warmer, and the maples moved up. And things have shifted a lot back and forth over many years. I'm going to jump about 8,000 years on you. I hope you don't mind and don't get blown away by how fast we just jumped. I'm going to move to about 250 years ago. And the idea is back when the mammoths are now gone, but Native Americans are on the landscape managing it. And this is when we are looking at when prairies were actually true prairies that covered millions of acres and started from the Midwest and stretched up into Michigan here. And we had a deciduous forest and more of a coniferous forest. And again, what you can see there is that it's mixed up. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We kind of are south meets north and east meets west out here, which I think is a neat place to be. So maps have been made. Some of the notes from the very first surveyors who came in the early 1800s to southern Michigan took notes on what the landscape looked like. And from that, some very smart people started creating maps made from the notes of the first surveyors. So we sort of get a snapshot of right around 1820, 1830 of what our region looks like. Now this is pretty overwhelming. That's a lot of different little things to try and read out here. But what I want you to do is to make your eyes blurry. This time of the night, sometimes that's a little bit easier to do than others. Make your eyes a little bit blurry and sort of get the general idea that you've got dark green and lighter swaths of sort of tan, orange, and red out there. What does that mean? This is a region of beech maple forest. We are in the rain shadow, in the snow belt of Lake Michigan. The moisture content is higher. But also, here's that moraine again. The Kalamazoo Marine is running right here. So we've got water infiltration coming out of spring water. So we've got rich, clean river systems starting from right here. We also have the Kalamazoo coming through this whole area till it hits the moraine, jumps north, and then makes a beeline for the lake. The St. Joseph River couldn't decide where to go. It started over in Hillsdale, kind of stretched up and then down, and then came over and hit the moraine and headed south. And it visited Indiana for a while. And there was a point in time where it just kept going south and went down to the Mississippi. Joined the Kankakee and was part of the Mississippi drainage. Till finally, it broke through the moraine again down near Niles, and the river turned and became a Lake Michigan River again. Welcome back. So another way to think about this, in my eye, of climate and change and moisture, but meanwhile, it's being managed, and it's on dry, gravelly soils. Let's think about this in terms of fire. Now, if you blur your eyes, it gets a little bit more of a picture of, imagine the fires coming from Indiana, that big prairie region. The winds are blowing out of the west and the south, pushing the flames, and they come up and spill across our region. But here we've got the St. Joe River and the Galeen River acting as a fire break. And we have rich, moist forests here. They don't like to burn as much. This is very flammable, dry soils. Oshtemo Township was a black oak barren, the largest contiguous block of black oak barren in the state. And when you hear the word barren, you get the idea that it wasn't thick, juicy, lush vegetarian, that's my wife, vegetation out there. This was dry, coarse, gnarly black oaks, not growing much more over 30 feet, diameters maxing out like this. These aren't great big rich open forests. It was a tough place to grow, but it was a good place to light fires and to hunt game out there. And there's a whole story and neat stuff to explore about the way Native Americans managed the landscape and where they chose to live that I would love to go on and on about. But we're here to talk about Lake Michigan more. But another time, because I think there's a very interesting story to be told about the prairies up here in Kalamazoo and the village that later became Maple Hill Mall. And the first survey notes describe coming up out of the river valley up into this gorgeous prairie with a vista where you can look west from the prairie, and that's where the Indian village was. And so someone said, why would they be there? There's no water. Well, at the base of the moraine is all of the best spring water, is what I can think of. So while they're high and dry, there's good, clean spring water nearby. And I think also if you're worried about mosquitoes in the river bottoms, a high prairie would be a good place to live. But I digress. Let's think about some of these examples of these rich natural communities we have, such as Warren Woods. It's a national landmark site. It's one of the only blocks of old-growth beech maple forest left in the country. There's only about 200 acres of that, and that was set aside by Mr. Warren, and I'm forgetting his first name here, back in the early 1900s. He set up a foundation for it, and he set up a 100-year lease to the state for it to be kept in its primeval state. There's one of the earliest deed restrictions you'll see on record. And that was a whole, I think, fascinating story of when that deed restriction, that lease, 100-year lease with the state, was due to expire right about this year. It was either 2015, 2016, right about now. But we were able to work with the DNR and the Family Foundation to have that property permanently transferred to the state of Michigan. And the Family Foundation would not agree to that unless another third party was there as oversight with the state, because they didn't want any crazy state legislators to get the idea to log the old growth forest for cash or put campgrounds where it didn't belong. So that's what Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy was named as that third party to oversee Warren Woods to make sure that it remains in its primeval state. That is one of the best places if you want to see a beech maple forest. There's other little bits here and there, but this is one of the best. What's that? Where you've never seen it? It's near Three Oaks, Michigan, Berrien County. So you almost go to Warren Dunes and turn left, head inland, and it's on between Warren Woods Road and Elm Valley Road.
It's a stunner place for spring wildflowers. It's
Yeah.
the first place I saw trailing arbutus. That was the first time I got to see one. Oh.
Yeah, blue-eyed Marys. There's it's the who's who in spring wildflowers down there. It's beech trees, all that big around. Sugar maples, all that big around. You occasionally see specimens that big, but rarely are you in a forest where you're surrounded by giants like that, where it's just one after another down there. An oak savanna. We don't have many great big blocks of oak savanna to show off. because they were such wonderful places to settle. Just over between Comstock and Galesburg, Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy owns a property called the Chipman Preserve. That's about 220 acres, where we're working to restore oak savanna. This is an artwork done by Amelia Hansen for the preserve to sort of create the vision of there. And oak savanna is open grasslands with a few specimen trees, large, like bur oaks. This was one of the pictures from the very first time we visited the preserve. This is a little bur oak branch. And does anyone know this purplish blue flower? Lupine, lupin, yes, wild lupin. It's lupin leaves down here. I was excited because some of the oak savanna remnants were there. And through a help of a lot of the volunteers, some of whom I recognize in the audience tonight, have been hand collecting that lupin and spreading it throughout the preserve. And now we're getting much larger swaths throughout that property. Fort Custer is another place, another region with oak savanna to get to know that kind of habitat out there as well. What about these other natural communities? Like some of the big swath we were looking at, there was a lot of beech maple forest. There was a lot of sort of different types of oak-based communities. But when the glaciers retreated, they left behind some pretty neat little spots. And right just down into Portage is where you'll find Bishop's Bog, one of the few true bogs in our area. A bog is created when a big block of ice in that ice cream that's oozing and being eaten away, there is a chunk of hard ice that the kids can't eat. And it just stays in place there. And after the glacial ice cream has left, that eventually melts out and you're left with a hole in the ground. And that fills in with water. And you just add a few thousand years and it fills in with sphagnum moss. And it creates a very acidic, specialized condition that you normally only find much farther north. But these plants got left behind. As the climate warmed and kept going, the bog plants could survive because that sphagnum moss kept it cold. And where you find pitcher plants and tamaracks in the extremely rare orange or yellow fringed orchid. That's a special place to go visit, especially during the summer, to see some really neat, unusual plants out there. The floating boardwalk will take you out into the bog out there.
Wear sandals and no socks.
Yeah, the floating boardwalk, keep moving, because if you stand still too long, it settles a little bit, and you start getting a little bit damp, and then you decide, I better go check out the pitcher plant over here, and then you're okay for a little while till you start settling. So it keeps you moving. Yeah. A place that's near and dear to me, because I finally got my master's degree after just a little 6 years working on a thesis, was exploring the bluffs of the Glen area, actually from South Haven north. There's some really interesting things going on there. No sand dunes. Sand dunes are overhyped. They're neat and all, but they get all the press. The bluffs are really cool, especially when you get a bluff where the lake border moraine really comes to the edge, because that's where the seeps start having. Remember I mentioned how the groundwater goes down into the moraines? Well, if you can get a moraine that comes out, sticking out into Lake Michigan, the water comes oozing out at the face of Lake Michigan, and you have an 80-foot bluff with a wetland in the middle of it, of where it's seeping out. And sometimes there's really neat, for me it's really neat, pH shifts and changes where you get extreme alkaline conditions, and you have something called a fen growing on about a 60-degree angle next to the lake. And you get beautiful wildflowers like fringed gentians blooming in September along there. Great blue lobelias are out there. And again, this is one of the best places to see. Casco Township Park is about where it starts, right here, but it's this moraine area right along Lake Michigan here, where you'll see those. I went exploring trying to find the others, but South Haven happened. So the urban area at the end of the great place to build a city, but they rob all of the groundwater. out there into storm drains, and the bluffs get developed, so that's gone. And then down here, this is Union Pier area, again, development. I actually thought I'd found one. I'd heard reports of it, and I asked someone on the beach, are there any clay bluffs, like places where kids slide and get wet in the clay? And it's like, oh, you're looking for Clay Mountain. That's right over there. Well, it was until the big house went in and they put sheet piling all in there and put the French drains around it, and now it's dry. But and then St. Joe happened. This one is still here, though. That's because it's owned by Whirlpool, and the Upton family has kept that from ever being developed, and that's just part of Whirlpool campus. So there's a fascinating clay bluff. If you walk in from Rocky Gap Park, and just walk a mile or so up there, you can find it.
What's your definition of a fen?
A fen is a spring-fed wetland with an alkalinity usually over 7.5, about 7.5 to 8.5. That's tough living conditions, but it's spring-fed. It's going to have sedges and lots of wildflowers in it as well.
Nate, can you please repeat, you mentioned north of South Haven, Stone Township.
Yeah, Casco Township. If you look on their website, that's one of their first nature areas. They're very excited to have started a natural area program. And so there's access off a Blue Star Highway. They have a universal access trail that'll lead you out to the overlook and the bluff. And there's some pit toilets, and they recently acquired more land next to it where they built a giant stairway, I don't know if it's still there, down to the beach there. But that gives you a nice 100 to 120 foot view over the lake. But if you go there in September, end of August, that's where you might see some of the great blue lobelia and the fringed gentians in bloom along the bluffs there. The other thing I was going to point out about those areas is that they are a natural refuge for our northern species. So like the bog species got left behind when the glaciers left, the little crooks and seeps and little carved out areas along the shoreline of these bluffs turned out to have the same effect. And you can find species that you'd normally not find till much farther north tucked away on our Lake Michigan shoreline. They're sort of trapped in time, where you can actually find things like mountain ash, which the next nearest place it grows pretty much is near the Mackinac Bridge. So that transition from Lower Peninsula to Upper Peninsula. White cedar, northern white cedar, flourishes along the shores of Lake Michigan on these clay bluff systems. The other places you have to look for are inland along spring-fed creeks and streams, like Pierce Cedar Creek Institute. Cedar Creek is named because of the white cedar, and it's one of the few places in our region inland where you can find white cedars growing naturally. It's these specialized microclimates that are created by the cooling waters of Lake Michigan or the cooling spring waters from a spring that can let us keep white cedar and buffalo berry growing right there in our area. So again, so this is looking backwards a little bit, sort of like how did these plants get here? Some of them retreated north with the mastodons and didn't look back. Some hung around and are hiding in little cool, wet places that still feel like the north, in these bogs and little ravines along Lake Michigan. Other species from the south came following on up. But now where do things stand now? What's our future? What's it look like now? Let's go back to look at our landscape out here. What happened? Well, a lot of us happened. A lot of development happened. A lot of farming happened. And again, climate plays a big role in this. What grows in this region from Allegan area looking down, Bangor, down all the way down to Berrien Springs? Fruit trees. There we have the fruit belt. That's the modifying climate effect of Lake Michigan along the fruit belt. We have our glacial outwash areas and moraines over here. Great place to grow corn. This is one of the most irrigated counties east of the Mississippi. It produces more seed corn than any other county in Michigan, and possibly, I think, through multiple states. We are in corn land. This rich area here, Schoolcraft. If I go backwards, let's see if I can go backwards here. This big yellow spot, does anyone know what that is? It was a prairie, and it's somewhat round. That was Prairie Ronde, the largest prairie in all of Michigan. If you go driving down 131, you can still see that amazing rich black soil. That is some of the richest farmland in our region. So that is this. Here, there. So, and then you can start actually seeing some of the largest blocks of conservation area in here. Does anyone know what that is? The Allegan Forest, the Allegan State Game Area. And over here we have the Berry State Game Area in Yankee Springs. Down over here, yep, Fort Custer is in that area here. And so we start thinking about what's left. What have we left behind of our natural areas? So we covered geology, we covered climate. Let's talk conservation here in the last few minutes. Quick questions for you. Is the place you enjoyed nature as a child still a natural area? Can kids still go enjoy that? How about your current favorite place? Is it protected? There. We answered that question about the Cooley Farm. Do we want to keep those places? I think universally we say yes, but what does it take to keep these places so the next generations get those experiences we had and learn to appreciate things, at least we think, in the way we had the opportunity to appreciate? So, my organization tries to make nature preserves, and actually, the donor of the Kessling Nature Preserve, we were just going to call it the Kessling Preserve, and he says, that sounds an awful lot like jam to me. I don't know. At least throw nature in there so people know I'm not just making jam. How do you preserve nature? Because it's dynamic. It's been changing. We know it's going to continue to change. How do you preserve something that's supposed to change and needs to change to be able to adjust to future conditions? Because everything around it is changing. You know, historically, when the ice was retreating and the mammoths were munching and the mastodons, and they could keep walking north. And the only thing they had to worry about was when they got to the Mackinac Straits, could they swim? You know, the trees were dropping seeds left and right, and they marched and moved and could follow back there. But our landscape's a bit more fragmented now. Can stuff change? How much did it change before? I think a really interesting book to read, and I'll give you the list of the name for it, so don't worry about scribbling it down right now. I'll hand that out to you. It's called Forest in Peril by Hazel Delcourt. She was one of the first female forest ecologists to come around and pioneered the idea that our forests, the eastern deciduous forest as we knew it, was not a relic that survived the last ice age, but actually a conglomeration of little bits of different forests that formed after the ice age. It was controversial in the day, but she came forward and was able to prove it through pollen, going into the bogs and collecting pollen from thousands of years ago and looking through and identifying the concentration of tree species in bog sediment, and could show that our forests have changed many times over the thousands of years. In general, it was a gradual process, But you ended up with the species coming together and having time to figure each other out. There's a constant competition between the plants for resources, for sun, for soil. But when they get it right and there's time, it makes a beautiful coming together. And you get places like Warren Woods, where you get the carpets of spring beauties and trilliums and stuff underneath the beaches. It's hard to find the places that are intact. And in Southwest...
The library will be closing in 30 minutes. Please begin to make your final material selections at this time. If you need to apply for a library card, please come to the circulation desk.
All right, I'm used to people just holding up like a 10-minute card, not the 30-minute announcement. So the situation is, for our natural areas in Southwest Michigan, here along the southern portion of Lake Michigan, we need to actively take care of them. They need repairs. They need some of the additions put back into them. So it's 7:30. I know that's happening at my house right now. I savor this right now. So right over many of you know it as Nazareth Campus. We're the Sisters of St. Joseph here, along Gull Road and Nazareth Road. The sisters donated 60 acres to Southwest Michigan Land Conservancy because they wanted to make sure that someone could take care of that land in perpetuity. Many sisters grew up and learned from the older sisters that this was called the land of vision. It was their spiritual retreat, to go reconnect with nature, to recharge. They named it Bow in the Clouds, referring to, in Genesis, after the great flood. And Noah has found dry land, and the rainbow appears. And it's the covenant not to ruin the earth, not to destroy the earth again. And so they felt they have a covenant with the land and thought it was appropriate to name that. And they passed that on to us. So we are working very hard to be worthy of that trust, to try and take this little bit of 60 acres within the city limits of Kalamazoo and keep it beautiful. Make it a healthy natural area. Make it a beautiful place for people to be able to visit and experience nature, where people can go and enjoy. We've been working very hard the past few years to try and restore it, get rid of some of the invasive species. We found that historically farming had put in some ditches in there, and that was where we found the walls of buckthorn. There was about 10 acres of solid, glossy buckthorn down there. We got some grant support and started cutting, and here we burned, and you can see on the city website, these are little scorch marks. We got rid of all the brush piles there, and it's come back a long way. We jump back to that view there. You can see it's really starting to respond. The sedge meadows are coming back. We're working on a trail system that will be a universal access for at least a portion of the property. So fully wheelchair accessible, you can enjoy the overlooks. We're going to put in a boardwalk system to allow people to get down into, there's a small boardwalk system for the Boy Scouts built years ago, but it's only small foot traffic. We're going to fundraise to put in something bigger and larger to make sure everyone can go down and enjoy that same land of vision, the springs. We've been working to restore the oak savanna. These oaks were around when Kalamazoo was founded, but they were lost under a wall of a different species of buckthorn and honeysuckle and black locust, and have only since been revealed since we started doing cutting and clearing and burning again. Right around the corner from here, on the corner of 4th and KL, I'm very excited to let you know that later this year we're going to be putting in the public entrance to what we hope to have a better name for soon, the Kale Avenue Preserve. It was donated to us by Dr. Dick Malott. It's about 70 acres, and it's got some of those really neat, now you know all about the glacial moraines. You're coming off of the Kalamazoo Moraine, and we've got kettle hills and cames and rolling territory, and working on a combination of oak woodland and oak savanna restoration out there. So keep your eyes open for the grand opening of that later this year, because that's taken quite a bit of work. We've been having volunteers take care of it. We actually brought in heavy equipment and cleared about 15 acres of honeysuckle and autumn olive and other exotic brush. And within one growing season, it was turning back into that savanna landscape out there.
Does the savanna have to be an oak savanna?
In our region, it was predominantly oak, but there was a mix that you'd find hickories, but also you'd find bur oaks, white oaks, chinkapin oaks, black oaks, and I'm probably forgetting a scarlet oak there as well. But there was other species in there. They were just the most common out there. So that's how they get called oak savannas, but there's variety in there as well.
Whereabouts is this kale now?
It's on the corner of 4th and Kale. The entrance will be off of Kale Avenue. We're working with the township to create, sort of be part of their master plan. The old landfill is out that way, and it's been capped, and the idea is to create a pedestrian component to there, and ball fields and that sort of thing, and we're almost across the street from there. So we hope to tie that in together. I want to finish up with Pilgrim Haven. Going back to Lake Michigan, I thought it only appropriate we finish up on Lake Michigan here. Pilgrim Haven was about 30 acres of a church camp. For many years, was part of the Michigan Conference of United Church of Christ until the 80s, and it was bought by the Parrish family. And Sue Parrish just kept it with the family for years until she passed away, and she left it to the Land Conservancy and to make it a public nature preserve once again. And so we want to take this historic church camp that's seen a lot of use as a camp and do what we can to take the natural features of it and bring it back and have it accessible to the public here. So it's roughed up in places, but there's still little bits of the beech maple forest in there. The trilliums still bloom. The jack-in-the-pulpits still pop up. And it's a great place for the kids to go play where that creek flows out into Lake Michigan. It's actually a wonderful excuse for me to play in the creek. My son wants to throw rocks. I get to play in the creek out there. It is just south of South Haven. And actually, if you type that into Google, they know exactly where it is because Google knows everything. It shows up on the map right there. It's just north of Van Buren Dunes State Park. The creek that flows through the preserve actually starts in Van Buren State Park, and the outlet comes out through Pilgrim Haven Natural Area out into there. So, last questions for the evening. This one's more for you to answer to yourself. Where do you want to go? Thinking about natural areas all this evening, where do you want to go, and who do you want to take with you? Maybe you've thought of a new place you want to explore. Maybe you've brought memories of old places you want to explore. But I think you should go to those places, and you should take a young person with you. Think about a grandchild, a child, someone else's children, the neighbor's kids. Give them a break. Give the parents a break. Get the kids out there. Take them with you. So with that, who's going to go someplace? Yeah, where are you going to go? Grand Mere State Park, wonderful place. That place has, I think the stat was over a third of all of the plants that are found in Michigan can be found in that state park alone. There's an amazing diversity in there. Any other places people are feeling inspired to go visit? Yeah.
I had a really great canoe trip down the Kalamazoo River from the Allegheny Dam to Douglas.
Oh, that is a spectacle. That is one of the most wild stretches of river you can find in our region is through the Allegan State Game Forest along the Kalamazoo River. It's where the osprey and the eagle nest, black terns nest out there. Special place. Any questions about what I've shown you tonight? There? All right, then I want to leave you with your homework. 3 things, all right? Plan an area to go visit in the next 2 weeks, all right? Make it happen. Spring is thawing. It doesn't have to be far. The fish hatchery is going to have red-winged blackbirds within, I bet, the end of the week. Red-winged blackbirds are going to be back calling there. Before you're sick of having them at your bird feeders, go enjoy them in a cattail marsh so it feels like spring. You know, savor them. The frogs are going to be singing. The peepers are going to be kicking into high gear in just about 2-3 weeks. So figure out where you want to go, plan it, make it happen. And again, take somebody's kids with you. Support a conservation organization. I, of course, would encourage you to support mine. There is, you know, not by chance, all those things I handed out, a handy little envelope in the middle there in case you decide that's a good thing to do. But it doesn't have to be us. It can be all sorts of wonderful groups out there. And think about what it means to you. And I support you whether it's a small amount or a large amount, a gift of any kind. Maybe it's volunteering for them. Help them out. And lastly, it's one I'm going to try and do. Visit a Great Lake at least once a month for the rest of 2015. I thought in honor of what that great book, it makes me want to say, all right, I can't do that every year, but I think I'm going to make a shot at that. I think I'm going to try. Lake Michigan's easy. We'll see if I can pick up a couple other Great Lakes out there along the way. I will say, coming up pretty soon, there'll be other opportunities. At the end of the month, March 29th, Sunday, we're going to be having a field trip in honor of the Great Lakes out at Pilgrim Haven, geared towards children. We're doing something called a storybook walk, where we're going to be posting pages from this book about the day the Great Lakes drained away. And it's got wonderful, fun illustrations showing about what the bottom of the Great Lakes would look like if they had no water in it. How it would look like the Grand Canyon. But also what would neat waterfalls, what would the boats do out there. But we'll be posting pages from the book along a walk from the woods through all the way out to the beach. And so if you sign up with the Conservancy ahead of time, we've got room slot for, I believe it's 10 to 12 families for the first walk, where each family will receive a free book that's signed by the author. And then after 2 o'clock, that's from 1 to 2, and then after 2 o'clock, it'll just be open to the general public to come, enjoy the walk, enjoy the preserve. And then we'll be planning to do this again in the summertime when there's maybe a little bit less snow. It'll be all gone by the 29th, I promise. But there'll be a little warmer out there, so we'll be doing it again if that doesn't work for your schedule right there. Yeah, it should be a wonderful time. We're going to plan to do these at a series of more preserves throughout the summer. I wanted to say I'm going to put this back by the door on the way out if you're interested. It's a list of books and website references to support what I was talking to you tonight. So, for example, there's some of the books by Michigan Natural Features Inventory, like the Atlas of Early Michigan's Forests, Grasslands, and Wetlands, where if you're curious about that history, pre-settlement vegetation, if you love maps, this book is for you. But there's also information about each of the natural communities, a snippet in the first part about what they are, what they look like, where they are today. There's a new field guide that they just put out about natural communities of Michigan and where you can go see all the different kinds of there. That's listed on there. That book, Forest in Peril by Hazel Delcourt, is on there. I also put on Oak Openings by James Fenimore Cooper. I thought I'd throw an old school one in there. That was a book he wrote about Kalamazoo. It's set in Kalamazoo pre-settlement time. It's long and it's wordy. But it's interesting if you can skim for the interesting parts that talk about Kalamazoo. And then there's a long list of websites here too. I would say a lot of these websites are kind of hard to type in. At least it gives you the good name to type into the search engine, and then you can see if it recognizes that web page, unless you want to type in. The state of Michigan's terrible with their websites. It all ends with random letters at the end. So with there, all sorts of great resources there. So with that, remember, get out there, take the kids with you, support a land conservancy or some other nature-loving conservancy group, and visit the Great Lakes. Thank you very much.